Hello everyone, in this video we are going to discover how to play chess, and we are going to cover everything from scratch, assuming that you don't know anything about chess, like the word is new to you. So this video is going to be extremely critical and very essential in order for you to learn to play chess. So I don't want to waste any further time, so let's really jump into the video. There are 64 squares in the board of chess, 32 white squares and 32 black squares, 8 squares vertically, 8 squares horizontally. The vertical lines are denoted as files, as you can see the notation over here: A, B, C, G, E, F, G, H, and the horizontal lines are denoted as ranks, as you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, these are the notations. The horizontal squares are considered as ranks, and the vertical files or vertical squares are considered as files like A, B, C, D, and so on. So now, talking about pieces, a pawn is having 1 point, a knight is having 3 points, a bishop is having 3 points, a rook is having 5 points, but the queen is having 9 points, and the king, you can consider it as 0 or infinite. You can just leave the king. So yep, these are the numbers we use to denote the power of any particular piece. Now we are going to look at how we put the pieces on a board of chess. So the pawns are usually put on the 2nd rank and the 7th rank simultaneously. If you are playing with the white pieces, you put the pawns on the 2nd rank, and if you are playing with black pieces, you put the pawns on the 7th rank. There are 8 pawns each, both sides are having, so we are going to put the pawns like this, and yep, like this. So after fixing the pawns, now it's time to set up the rooks. The rooks are always placed at the corner like this. Like if you're playing with the black pieces, you put the rook on the A8 square and the H8 square. If you're playing with the white pieces, you put the rook at the A1 and H1. Now it's time to place the knights. Knight comes beside the rooks simultaneously. And then comes the bishop, and then you put the queen and the king. Now there is a big confusion where to put the queen and the king. So the basic idea here is to put the queen as the same color as your pieces. For example, if you're placing the white queen, you put the queen at the white square, and if you are playing with the black pieces, put the queen at the black square, and the only square remains is the king. Basically, you put the king to the opposite color of the square. That's it. And finally, we have the chessboard. So now we can finally start to play chess. So now we are going to discuss how to move the pieces. So yep, let's start. So for example, if I talk about a pawn moves forward, but it captures diagonally. What do I mean? Let's see. So we have a chessboard over here. Yeah, it's white to play. So yep, at the first move, at the beginning, white is having the privilege to move the pawn 1 square or 2 square. You're only having the privilege when the pawn is on the 2nd rank if you're playing with the white pieces, or the 7th rank if you're playing with the black pieces. If you're playing with the white pieces, you are having the luxury to push the pawn 1 step forward or 2 steps forward. For example, if you push the pawn 1 square forward, now you do not have the luxury to push the pawn 2 steps forward. But at the initial moment, you are having the luxury to put the pawn 2 steps forward. This is only for like a special case, you can consider it. But yeah, and you must be thinking like how to capture the pawn now, because now the pawn is on the way of the pawn. So basically, the pawn captures diagonally. That's the idea. For example, here if a black pushes up the pawn, you can actually capture the pawn diagonally. But you can only capture the pawn diagonally if it is at the side. For example, if the pawn is on c6, you cannot really capture the pawn. It is just way too long. If the pawn is beside the pawn, then only you can capture the pawn diagonally. That's the only idea. You can capture the pawn diagonally. If white doesn't capture, black can as well capture the pawn. So this is the idea of how to use the pawn. You push the pawn, and if you want to capture the pawn, any piece, you capture it diagonally. That's the idea. So that's how you use a pawn. That's how a pawn moves. So now let's quickly check out how to move a bishop. Talking about a bishop moves diagonally like this. It's very simple to understand how a bishop moves. It moves diagonally everything, anywhere. If it's a light square bishop, it moves at the light square. That's it. That's how a bishop moves. It's as simple as that. Now let's talk about how to move a rook. A rook moves vertically and horizontally as well. Like everything. A rook can travel anywhere horizontally and vertically. And yeah, that's it. That's how a rook moves. If pawn is in the between, definitely the rook cannot go to this particular square because the pawn is in between. But the rook can capture the pawn. That's the idea. So that's how a rook moves. So now let's talk about how does a queen move. A queen is basically moves like a rook and the bishop. It moves vertically, horizontally, and diagonally as well. So basically you can consider a queen as a combination of a bishop and a rook. That's how a queen moves. It's very simple. If you understand the basics, it's very easy to play chess. That's how a queen moves. So now let's talk about the king. If you are having a king is considered as the most powerful piece, but in reality in the game of chess, it's a very weak piece. You can consider it as, because the king can actually move anywhere, like anywhere, but it can only move one step at a time. Basically you can consider the king as an old piece. Maybe the king is old, so it can only move one square at a time. Like it can move anywhere but one square at a time. That's it. Now let's talk about the most trickiest piece. Knight. Knight usually moves as an L shape like this. You can consider it as an L. So basically the knight moves like an L, like this, like here. These are the squares where a knight moves like this. So basically to make it a better understanding, you can consider it as a knight moves like 2.5, 2.5, 2 squares and a half, 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 2 squares and a half. Like this. This is how a knight moves. Knight is having a special ability to climb over other pieces. For example, if I'm having this particular position, the knight can simply jump over to this c3 square. Though the pieces are in between, but it doesn't matter to the knight. The knight simply jumps in, and that's how a knight moves. So finally we have discussed how every single piece moves. So now let's try to understand a bit more about chess. So you must know, whenever you are having a blank chessboard and must be having some confusion where to put the pieces, you must always consider the corner right square. If the corner right square is of a white square, from that moment onwards you put the white squares, like white pieces like this. For example, this is a chessboard. The bottom right square is of a light square. So this is how it should be. And finally you start placing the white pieces. You place the pawn, you place the rook, you place the knight, you place the bishop, the queen goes to the same color as the square, the king goes to the opposite color. And you do with the same with the pawn. You set up the rooks. Sorry about that, that's the wrong rook. Now the knight, now the bishop. The queen deserves to add the same square of the queen, and the king at the opposite square. So finally we have discussed how to set up a chessboard. So now we are going to, what we can do, we can try to look at a special move in chess. For example, like, let me just make some move. And now, okay, now this is a, if you know this, it's good. If you don't know this, it's going to be very essential. So whenever you are having such a position where the king is beside the rook, like this, like there are no pieces in between, like there is no bishop, there is no knight, you can castle. It looks like a bit weird, like how the hell this is happening, but yeah, this is also considered as castling. It is done to ensure that your king is safe. This is the power you have. But to make use of the special ability, you must not move your king. For example, if you moved your king first, now you cannot really castle. It is not allowed to castle because you have already moved your king. So in order to castle, you cannot move your king. For example, if you move the rook, still you cannot castle. For example, if you still have the same position, but as I have moved the rook, I'm not having the ability to castle. That's the reason. If you ever want to castle, you must not move your king and the rook. And castle is something that you must do as soon as possible because it helps your king to become safe. Basically, the king moves two steps rightwards, and if you're doing a long castle, which I'm going to show you, for example, let me just take you to a random position like this. Okay, we have this position where the king is having two options. The king can either can make a long castle or can make a short castle. We consider it as a short castle because the rook is much closer to the king, and we consider it as a long castle because the rook is much farther than the king. So what happens in castling? You basically, if you want to do a short castle, you put the king two steps rightwards, and you put the king two steps rightwards, and basically the rook comes to sideways of the king, like this. The rook goes over here, the king goes over here. Now, if I want to do a long castle, still the king goes two squares leftwards, and the rook goes by the king's side. That's how you castle. That's how simple it is. There is nothing to be complicated. Castle is something that you must do in any case because it helps your king to become safe. And now let's talk about how the game ends. Talking about how the game ends, for example, you are having a position like this, and it's black to play. So black can simply play the move this, and it's a mate. Okay, let's put the king. Both the sides must have a king. Okay, now it's a checkmate. The reason is the queen attacks the queen, and the king is not really having any squares to run away, and there are no pieces to protect the king. For example, if there would have been a bishop, the bishop would have simply captured the queen, and it's winning for black. It's not anymore checkmate. But another case can be like if white is having a knight and it's a check, so white can really put the knight in between. So now there are no checks. There are no checkmate. So a checkmate is a scenario when the king can't really be saved and it is attacked by the opponent pieces. No piece can capture the opponent's piece. No piece can come in between in order to protect the king. So it is considered as checkmate. And what is a check? Now talking about a check, what is check? A check is something that the king is attacked and you must remove the king. You must protect the king. You must capture the opponent's piece if you can. For example, it's a check. If you can capture the piece, you can. And if you are having space to run away, so you can run away like this. So it's basically, it's not checkmate because you are having the ability to run away. So yeah, that's how you play chess. Okay, so now we are going to discuss a very critical and very mind-blowing ability in the game of chess, which can maybe blow your mind. So it is a disclaimer. It is a possibility that after seeing this move you are going to leave chess, but I must, it's my duty. So for example, this is a special case scenario. If you are playing with the white pieces, the pawn is on the 5th rank, when your opponent is having the privilege of pushing the pawn 1 step or 2 steps forward, and he wishes to push the pawn 2 steps forward, then you are having the special ability to capture the pawn. It looks like such an odd thing, because like, how the heck can this be happen? But this is the way of life. This is the only special ability that the white have, or any side have. For example, if black pawn is on the 4th rank, when white is having the ability to push the pawn 2 steps forward, black can capture the pawn. But if white pushes the pawn 1 step, and then white pushes the pawn another step, like 1 by 1, then black cannot really capture the pawn, because white pushed the pawn 1 by 1. And if white pushes the pawn 2 steps forward and black plays something, and now white plays something, then black cannot really capture the pawn, because if black want to use the superpower or special ability, black can only use this ability when the moment white pushes the pawn 2 steps forward, then only black can capture the pawn if black wishes to. So this is a special scenario which is also known as passant, a very typical rule in chess. So we have already discussed how to set up a chessboard, how many squares are in a chessboard, how many white squares, how many dark squares, what are the point system, how to place the pieces, how do each and every piece move. And yeah, that's how you should play chess. You can try it out. You can share this video. If you like the video, then make sure to share this video with everyone. If you learned anything new, then make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and make sure to click the notification bell to make sure that you are being updated. So this is how you play chess. I hope that you like this video. So I'm going to see you soon. Till then, stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess.